John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast. And today we're going to do something a little different. I've actually been talking with one of the patrons, and we thought it might be cool to actually discuss the story arcs that we just finished in the podcast. So today we're going to be discussing the whole first 22 issues of Hellblazer. So I guess we should just get straight into it. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Matt. I'm Hoku. I'm a longtime listener, first time calling in, I guess you could say.
Well, nice. Why don't you tell us how you got into comics and specifically John Constantine?
Okay, well, from when I was a kid, I really liked comic books. I grew up just buying any issue that I could of anything. Most of it was Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman. I actually dug Aquaman back in the day. I thought he was pretty cool, even though I know most people think he's lame, but I actually thought he was a cool character back then. And he's now, of course, with Jason Momoa. He's even more cool. But
Oh yeah, with Jason Momoa playing him, he's way cooler than he was before.
yeah, I mean, random issues. I was never collecting them issue by issue, so I would just find an issue, read it, not know what it was about most of the time. Just being like, oh, these characters are so cool. Like I had no idea who Azrael was when he took over for Batman. I just thought Batman was in this like crazy outfit, and I couldn't understand what happened. Like I didn't even know about.
What, his back's broken?
Right? I didn't even know about Bane or any of that stuff when I picked up like one of those issues. I was just like, why is he dressed up like he's Shredder? So started out a DC fan, then started devouring Marvel later on when they printed out like Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate Avengers. Before that, I hadn't really known much about Marvel, mostly stuck with DC. So that was my foray into Marvel, and then continued more into Marvel, I would say. And then I mostly got trades. I didn't really do issues anymore. And over time, it's just been more and more difficult to collect comic books just because I've moved around a bit. It's hard to drag your collection with you.
Oh, I feel ya. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So when I found your podcast, and actually one of the first issues or episodes I ever listened to was Hush, which I think was your first one, right?
Yeah, that one's our first one, and man, it's so bad. But you got to start somewhere, I guess.
It was a few episodes in. I think it was like your first five or so. And when I was looking through, I was like, Hush, I know that one. I haven't like actually fully read the whole thing. Let me listen to that and see if I can like catch up. And from there, I would be like, oh, I've read that. Let me see what they think about it. Or I've never read that. Let me see what they say about it. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where it started, was with the main Planes, Trains, and Comic Book podcast. So
Oh, nice. Well, so anyone who doesn't know, I do have a couple other podcasts. One of them is called Planes, Trains, and Comic Books. That was my first one with my buddy John. And in that, we just kind of break down story arcs kind of at random. It's not themed like this one or my Swamp Thing podcast. So we were doing that original one, and then I got the idea to do this whole read my favorite series issue by issue and just try to go through them. So I initially started with Swamp Thing because I love that series, and then branched off into Hellblazer, so that's what she's referencing there. But specifically, Hoku, what was your introduction to the character of John Constantine and the overall Vertigo world, which is the imprint that DC has for the more mature titles that they published in the 90s and 2000s?
I would say, like in my late teens, I found Sandman, like way after it had ever come out, and I was obsessed with it, absolutely obsessed with it.
Of course.
And in the first few issues, I got it by trade. So in the first trade, when Morpheus is looking for his stuff that was taken from him, he meets a guy named John Constantine. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, oh, a guy named John Constantine. He seems kind of like a dick, but he's funny and helps him out a little bit, find his sand and everything. And then the series moved on. Never really thought about that character ever again. And then a movie came out starring Keanu Reeves called Constantine.
Hell yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is a cool movie. Very, angels versus demons, very, religious themed, but stoic character. Still didn't really make the connection there because I'd actually forgotten about John Constantine being in Sandman at that point. So I was just like, oh, Constantine, that's a cool movie. Cool effects, interesting story. And then through your podcast, when you started the Swamp Thing part, and there's a character introduced called John Constantine, all of a sudden it clicked that the character from Sandman was the character from the movie, was his character in Swamp Thing. I was like, he's been here the whole time.
He's been in your life for a very long time. You just didn't know it.
He's the same guy. It was the whole, Einhorn. There's Finkel. Finkel is Einhorn. So,
well, nice. That's a very cool way to start and get introduced to Constantine. So, well, let's just get straight into this. We're gonna do, like I said earlier, we're gonna break down the first story arcs of Constantine, the first 3 ones specifically. Which, if you're reading them in the trade form, they are Volume 1 is Original Sins, Volume 2 is The Devil You Know, and Volume 3 is The Fear Machine. And the first thing I wanted to bring up is, like, this first story arc of Constantine in Original Sins. We'd only seen John before in Swamp Thing, in the Alan Moore run, and he wasn't really a fully fleshed out character. He would just kind of come in and then disappear as needed in the story, and he was always mysterious. So with this first story arc, like the first 2 issues of Original Sins, I mean, you're getting one of John's friends, Gary, getting possessed by a demon, and then John using his friend as bait, and also like basically getting his friend killed from that.
I mean, first impression is he's kind of a cheeky bastard.
Right.
But he has good intentions.
Probably.
Even if those good intentions end up getting his friends killed, it seems like he has sort of a grand scheme of like, well, I'm going to save the city, but my friend has to pay the price for it.
Oh, yeah. Man, you never want to be one of John's friends. And the friend they're talking about is Gary Lester, which I mentioned before.
Yes.
And if you don't remember the story arc, he brought a hunger demon back from the Middle East and unleashed it on New York. Oh, and since you saw the movie, did that remind you of that scene in the movie where that guy couldn't get enough of the alcohol and he just kept pouring it down his throat?
Yes. So finally seeing the source material for the movie and realizing, that's why that scene was so cool. Here's where it came from.
Yeah, I love that they have all that stuff in the movie from the original story arcs, like even the stuff from the really early arc, like Original Sins, and then they include a lot of stuff from the Garth Ennis run later on where John gets cancer. I mean, and honestly, that's all like the really, really good stuff in the movie is all the stuff that's in the comics.
I am excited to see how it plays out and wait for those moments of like, so that's where that came from. Moments from like the movie. I'm actually curious to like rewatch the movie at some point and remember all those things. Probably before the second one comes out, I'll probably rewatch it.
Yeah, whenever that happens, if that happens.
Whenever that happens.
I've been waiting for a long time. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the movie, but all the good stuff in that movie, like I said, was from the comic.
Right.
And I would just love to see some of that stuff adapted into a second movie. Did you ever watch the TV show with Matt Ryan as John Constantine?
I think I saw one episode, like the first episode. I think I might have seen the pilot, but didn't continue watching after that. It just slipped through the cracks and I couldn't finish it. But I loved the guy they casted for Constantine. I thought he was spot on. Looked just like him.
Well, now I love Keanu Reeves, but if you could just put him in place of Keanu Reeves in the movies,
Yes,
I would be very, very happy because he looks exactly like. Oh, did you know that John Constantine's based on Sting? I think I've mentioned it before in the podcast, but.
yes, I did not remember that until I watched the episodes, and then I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. He does kind of look like him during his like heyday.
Yeah, when he's in the police.
I would say, yeah, with the hair and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gotta love that. So the issues that are in the first story arc are issues 1 through 9, and that's, like I said, Original Sins is the name of that trade paperback. And I was wondering what you thought about how the pacing was, like the flow of it, because the first 2 issues are our story arc, and then issues 3 through 9 are kind of one single off stories. Maybe there's like a little bit of connection in there, but overall, they're all kind of just one shots that are introducing us to John Constantine.
I really liked that they started with a double issue. I mean, yes, the first issue itself was larger,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right, and than a normal one, and then that was a 2-parter before you got into the individual issues. I liked that style because it made the story seem more like richer, like it had more information to tell, and it wasn't just a single issue of like, here's a dude in a situation, and then then the situation gets wrapped up within like that first issue. Because sometimes they do that just to give them like a tiny arc of just like here's a sort of introduction, and then it's done, and then you move on to like a longer arc afterwards. But I like that they sort of stretched out his beginning so that you got to see like that he's haunted, literally haunted by the ghosts of his past.
Yeah, you never want to be a friend of John because you're going to end up as a ghost. But you had listened to the Swamp Thing podcast, so you knew who his friends are that were dead in these issues. So do you think that would be confusing to anybody who hadn't read those issues, or do you think it would be a little hard to understand what was going on without reading the Swamp Thing stuff?
Like if it were done in reverse and I had listened to Hellblazer before Swamp Thing, I think I would have been a bit confused about why there are all these ghosts around him. But the way they described it in the story, he was constantly like, it's not my fault, like piss off you guys, like stop bothering me, like there's nothing I can do about it. You kind of got the sense that something bad happened. And then I think they even mentioned Newcastle even in that first issue, didn't they?
Yeah, they do.
Right. So you get the idea that there are things in his past that happened that went very badly for a lot of people. And I liked the intriguing aspect of that where you're like, well, what happened? Like how many different things have happened to like cause all this turmoil and trauma for him? So
Yeah, and like why are they haunting him? I love that it takes like 12 issues to get to the Newcastle story arc, and it takes its time, but it also builds the character before you get there.
yes, when we finally came up to like, okay, here's your new cat flips, I was like, yes, I want to know what happened. And then I was like, this is horrible. I'm kind of not sure if I wanted to know what actually happened.
Yeah, and this it's like the opposite of the Alien effect, where it's not as good when you see it as it is in your mind, but in this it's actually like worse than it is in your mind.
Yes, it was actually worse.
And yeah, that's one of the things I love about this first story arc, Original Sins, is you get the first two issues, which are the introduction, and then you get these one-offs that are just super, super creepy.
Mhm.
And I don't know, man, they're just super messed up and really intense. I mean, you got that story arc with the Vietnam soldier that's really crazy.
Oh man, that one was horrifying.
Yeah, and the one where his niece gets abducted by the child killer.
That one was so disturbing. I remember like sitting there, like actually like grabbing onto. I think like I was sitting down, so I was like grabbing onto the couch, and I was just like, "Where is this going?
Yeah.
Please don't go in a direction that just kind of almost wincing, not wanting to hear the rest because I'm like, oh, what are they gonna do?"
Yeah.
So
And like this came out in the 80s, so that's like super hardcore for the times.
yeah, that's that. I mean, that's at the same time as what were the other storylines that were going on during those days? Like you had
There was like Justice League International, which was kind of like a funny title, a comedy.
yeah,
And then, but you also had already like The Watchmen had come out, and also Dark Knight Returns had come out already.
true.
But I don't think either of those are as dark and messed up as the stuff in this first trade of Hellblazer.
Yeah, because Vertigo was Hellblazer, it was Sandman, and Swamp Thing wasn't there yet, right? Was it there yet?
Well, actually, Swamp Thing was older, so it started in 82.
Oh, that's right.
And then it wasn't until 1993 when they made the Vertigo imprint that all the titles were wrapped into that. And until that happened, they just put like mature on the titles.
Yeah.
And like during the Alan Moore Swamp Thing run, that's what they did. And I don't know about you, but I think that Hellblazer is way more messed up than Swamp Thing.
Oh, for sure. I think that even some parts of it were more messed up than Sandman. And I remember when I first read that, I was like, wow, this got dark. Like the whole cafe scene, that whole issue was like, oh. And then this was actually a level above that, which I was not expecting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this one doesn't pull any punches at all. It starts off with like, him killing his friend, and then you find out he's got all his ghost friends and the horribleness that happened to them. And pretty much anybody in his life gets sucked into this horrible spiral of events.
Right. And he drinks and he smokes. He's not Superman. He's not even like Batman where you can kind of like respect his decisions to be like standoffish and not want to make friends with him. You're like, oh, yeah, he's kind of he's not like a bad guy, but bad things happen because of things that he does.
Yeah, for sure.
choices.
Oh, he makes the worst choices. I mean, maybe if he made more wholesome choices, the world would end or something like that.
Hmm.
You know, the world is not black and white. Sometimes it's a little bit gray. You know what I mean?
It's funny. I was thinking that uh, he actually reminds me a lot of Giles from Buffy, in that he does
Oh,
crazy
man,
shit in his
totally. Yes.
right.
Yeah, they were totally channeling him.
Absolutely, like the younger punk days where they just kind of messed around with demonic stuff, and then bad things happen. So he tries to correct that by becoming a watcher, and then guiding teenagers to stop evil. But he still has that whole dark side inside him, and under layers that most people don't see until time goes on. Then you're like, oh man, he's gotten into some deep shit.
Yeah, like I always loved that character, and I always wish that they could explore him more, like that dark side of his past. But unfortunately, it's not called Giles the Vampire Slayer, it's Buffy.
Right. I would have loved to have seen a Ripper spinoff. That would
Oh,
have been fun.
yes. That would have been amazing.
Well, actually, it probably would have just been John Constantine, because that sort of would have like totally matched. Maybe Constantine changed his name and moved to America. Became Giles.
Oh, yeah. You know that's some fan fiction right there. That's just too obvious. Someone has had to have written that for sure.
Yeah.
So getting back to the comic. So at the very end of the first story arc, we get John tricking both heaven and hell.
Hmm.
And he's able to do a switcheroo where he stops God's plans from creating a new Mary and giving birth to a new Jesus, while also managing to thwart the plans of hell. And I mean, I love that. Like, he's not on anybody's side, he is on his side.
Yeah. He kind of doesn't want either side to win.
Yeah, like I love how the writer doesn't write the Christian side or the God side. They're also horrible.
True. Yes.
Nobody's good.
Nobody's a good guy in this scenario, honestly. Everybody's got an agenda because they want to win, and then they want to win. And he's just like, I just don't want to be like involved. Like, I just don't want to be fucked with. Leave me out of it. And they're like, no, you're in this. He's like, okay, well, if I'm in this, no one's gonna win.
Yeah, we're all gonna lose, including me.
Mhm.
We're all gonna go down together.
Pretty much.
So once we get past that, which I think is actually a really good introduction to the character, doing those one-off issues, we get a Swamp Thing tie-in out of nowhere.
So weird.
And it's some lore that comes up every now and then, but not that often. So Swamp Thing actually takes over John's body, and there's definitely some stuff that I would call problematic, because John didn't necessarily consent to any of that.
Right? That's some gray area there for Swamp Thing to be.
If you haven't read those issues, Swamp Thing takes over John's body so he can get his wife pregnant,
Hmm.
so they can have a baby. So that means that John is the father of Swamp Thing's child, and also she's part demon as well because of the storyline earlier.
Yeah, with Nergal, right?
Yeah. And, that's something I always wish they touched on more. Like in Swamp Thing, obviously I haven't read all of it, but it would be super cool if they had got into that some more, because they haven't really touched on it ever since then. And I always thought it would be cool if they got into his daughter being like part demon, part elemental, and part John Constantine. I mean, that's just like such a cool
Yeah.
launching pad for a storyline that they never do.
If they really tapped into her, she could probably rival like Scarlet Witch for sheer power.
Oh,
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
for sure. Yeah, I would think so. I mean, she's got hell, she's got the green and like the elementals, and she's got the blood of the magus in her. So, like, yeah, she'd be totally powerful.
Right?
Yeah, but we will get into that more if we do one for Swamp Thing later on.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to touch on this because it is definitely like out of nowhere in the trade. Like, they just put Swamp Thing issues in there. And if you weren't following it, it would be kind of confusing. And then after that Swamp Thing stuff, we have the Newcastle story arc, which is great. And then we have the Fear Machine story arc, which I don't know about you, but to me, that is my least favorite story arc. Like,
Yeah.
even of like the whole series of John Constantine. And this is like my theory about it, but I think the reason why it feels like it slows down so much is
Okay. Yeah.
is because you have all these quick one shot and 2-issue story arcs, and those are just
Yes.
in and out. Like, they definitely don't overstay their welcome. I think the longest is just the first one and
Right.
Newcastle.
The first two, and then Newcastle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, just two. Like, not even three. Like, if you prepped us for Fear Machine by doing like two and then a couple individuals and then maybe a threefer and then a couple individuals, that might not have made Fear Machine seem so long.
Yeah, and that's the problem, I think, is, I mean, when you look at this story on Amazon, like issue by issue, it says on issue 1 that it's a 12-issue story arc, but, you know, it's not. It's 9. So I don't know if even DC was like, whoa, this is too long, or maybe the writer or something thought it was too long.
Maybe they counted the individual issues leading up to it as like part of the arc.
Maybe. I mean, it
Like,
totally said 12.
Pre-arc.
Like, I'm almost 100% that it said 12 for sure.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah, because I was surprised when I got to the end and all of a sudden it was only 9 issues long and 12 happened.
And yet it was still too long.
It was still too long. Yeah, you're right. Well, I think the issue is that he really takes his time, like, building relationships with these travelers and explaining their culture and everything. And also having to build up what this whole ley line magic thing is, because that's like a new concept that I didn't know about. And that's actually my favorite part of this story, is like the cool earth magics and all that stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're on the same page here with Fear Machine and its lack of movement. So, like, what did you think of it? How did you feel as we started to get into the Fear Machine story arc?
Well, I mean, how many issues exactly is the arc?
It's
I can't
9.
remember. 9 issues. It's an issue a month when it first came out. So you had to hold people's attention for 9 months on a single arc. And it just felt like there was both a lot of information in each issue, and yet it still wasn't satisfying at the end of each issue, where it was still just like, okay, we still have to wait to see what's going to happen in the next one. Then you get a little bit more, and then there's still, and when it was coming out, like when you were going through it episode to episode, I didn't know how long it was going to be. So every time I'm like, okay, so they're at the 5th issue now. Is the next one the finale? Is it? No. Okay. Is the next one the finale? No. Okay. Like, it just kept going. And while I thought, I mean, there were parts like, say, the letter that John got, where what was her name again?
The letter. Are you talking about Zed?
The letter that he got from Zed. Yes. Because he went to find.
So he went to go find what's her name? Mercury. Her name's Mercury.
Mercury, yes.
Oh, it wasn't
And
Zed. It
they
was
went
Marge who was
to-
sending the letters.
Yes, because they went to Ireland.
No, Scotland. They went to Scotland.
Scotland. Yeah, sorry. They went to Scotland. He went to go find Mercury. And she sends him that letter where they're like, hey, we got really into some magic and had an orgy. Wish you were here. By the way, we found Mercury yet. Was like, why did we need to know that? There could have been more prevalent information that we were learning about besides what you guys are doing, on your freaky parties.
Yeah. Well, it's hard because I think he was trying to build this air of community up, like, because Marge and Mercury, they're in the series longer than just in this arc. They could come back later, and I really like them when they come back. And also, he's like introducing the concept of what travelers are to Americans, because this is an American comic,
Right.
and like, we don't really have travelers like per se. I mean, not at least like they do in England or in Europe in general. So that's why.
I mean, now of course there's the whole van life thing, but back then I'm assuming it wasn't such
no, not at all.
as prevalent. Or if it was,
The closest I could think is that, like, someone who follows the Grateful Dead around or something.
right. But still, that's just like a tiny niche. It's not so much a movement as it is like groupies, right?
Right. I don't know if I'd call it groupies, but, just fans of the
Right.
band.
I mean, I get that he was trying to establish this community, but he spent a lot of time with them. And then occasionally we'd get some more information about the whole GOAG and all of the actual, like, demonic side of it that they were trying to work on with,
Right. Yeah, with the Fear Machine.
with the actual Fear Machine. So I get establishing the community, but maybe 1 or 2 issues on that
No, yeah, I hear you.
would have been fine.
Oh, yeah, I hear you.
Because
Like I said, this is my least favorite arc.
it's just every time they were cutting back to them, I'm like, I would like to know more about the actual fear machine, please. Can I hear more about the actual fear machine and where it is and what it
And what
means
exactly
and
does it
who's in
do?
charge of it? Exactly. Like, I get that you're trying to make people.
Even at the end of it, I'm not even 100% what happens at the end of this story arc.
Yeah, I still don't get what the whole end game was. Was it to make everyone crazy? Or
So the idea, I guess, so this is from what I gather, my interpretation. So originally you have the GOAG, which is like the sect of Masons,
Mhm.
right? The separate secret sect. They worship
Right.
the male energy of the earth, which is called Jalakantiliokin, right?
I'm glad you said his name because I could not remember how to say it correctly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if I'm technically saying it right. That's just how I say it. Yeah. So they're trying to raise him to cause fear throughout the land. And you know what? Wait. Step back. There's actually two things going on here I need to talk about.
Right.
And that's why this is so confusing. So there's the company that is using the fear machine to create civil unrest. And then there's the secret organization inside of that organization that is knowingly trying to raise the god Jalakantiliokin. And on top of that, I don't really know exactly what the end game was. Like, it's not super clear to me still.
That's why I was like kind of unsure about what the actual end game was. Was it sort of like a hell on earth sort of prospect that they were
I
going
don't know.
for?
I don't think so. I think it's supposed to be just like a male dominated society or.
Yeah, I mean, so their giant gross god thing was supposed to take over the world for them or control like I said, it was just a little unclear what the actual end game was. I get that they're like power and we want to rule, and it's like, but how and who
Yeah, like
and why?
exactly how does this god do that per se? And the other thing that's confusing is this company is taking the fear out of mental patients
Hmm.
and is putting him in this prison, which is forming that giant blob of fear that Mercury has to
Right,
fight.
the gross thing.
Right. But that is not Jalakantiliokin. That is the food for Jalakantiliokin.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
totally misread. I
Yeah, I
totally
mean,
misread that, misheard that.
it was confusing to me as I was reading it. So, I mean, I probably got it mixed up when I was explaining it. And like only now after I've read it a couple times, gone through it, uh it's definitely there's like 10 things going on at once, and that's probably why it feels like it slows down really,
Hmm.
because there's like a lot of things going on, and if he just simplified that part of it, like maybe the GOAG people are part of the fear machine people and they're not like a separate sect all trying to use the energies, you know.
Yeah, I think it was sort of like the layers in the layers. So you have like the secret society, and then there's the secret society, and then there's the secret society.
Yes,
The
exactly.
levels of like, this, but I know this, and then the guy at the top knows everything. But it's just him, like just him. But he had like just a few other people
Yeah,
that he still had
like
working for
seriously, it's
him.
just
You
him
know,
and one other guy
yeah.
he's like reporting to.
it it was just like, so you had like the slow moments with the caravan and the travelers, and then you had these sort of punctuations of like information that you got little tidbits of, and then right at the end they slam everything in your face, and then it's over, and I was like,
Yeah, like that's why I was like, maybe there was like a bunch more issues and they just told him, you got to wrap this shit up or something. And then he just like did it. But like that ending always confused me. Like it comes out of nowhere, like even when I
yeah,
was reading it. And then not only is there a lot of moving parts, but also the ending isn't really fully explained. Like, okay, so Zed and Marge raised the female energy by having sex with John.
right,
And then
and the egg.
oh yeah, the egg. That imagery is like crazy. Like if you didn't just listen to me reading them, if you read them for yourself, I think everybody would have a hard time explaining what's going on because a lot of it's open to interpretation and it's definitely not 100% clear what's going on.
I am grateful that on the YouTube version, you do have, in addition to the cover, like 2 pages of like usually just two random pages, but sometimes, and if you do this on purpose, thank you so much, you pick some spots where when you're trying to describe it, I'm still looking at it and being like, I would never be able to describe, like the giant eyeball fear blob thing.
Yes, yeah.
When you were describing it, I'm staring at the picture of it and being like, how, like you actually described it, but I still don't understand how. Like,
Yeah.
you're
And
able
if you
to.
didn't see the picture, you'd still be like, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to picture here.
Exactly. So,
Even if I did a good job describing it.
yes, you did. And I'm still staring at it like it's still indescribable to me.
Yeah, for real, it is.
When you had the panel in that last moment of them creating the female energy, and then there's the egg, and even that is still, I don't fully understand what the power that they created is, and how it defeated the male energy just from existing. Like,
Yeah, I think it's because they're like a yin and a yang, and together they don't overpower, they just cancel each other out or something like that. They neutralize it.
oh, okay.
Because they disappear and they don't go anywhere. They just kind of intertwine and
Yeah.
disappear. So you're kind of just like, okay, I guess they just go back into the earth, and then a big wave comes. And then, like, you know what did you think about this ending? I thought it was super weird because, like, a big wave comes, it pulls John out, and then he decides to just never go say goodbye to his friends or anything. Like,
And then it's just like, oh, well, I guess they'll just assume I'm dead, and that's probably for the best.
yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, with the track record of his friends,
Right.
they should probably stay away from him. And, like, I always thought it was weird that, like, he just leaves them and it's just like, okay, those people are gone now. I guess we're not going to talk about them anymore.
I'll call on them if I need them someday, and then be like, hey, by the way, I'm alive, and now I need your help with something.
Yeah. You know, one thing I wanted to talk about is obviously this story has a lot of female energy. It's a very feminist story. And I was just wondering if you had like any thoughts on that. Like, as a woman, like, how did it strike you? Did you think it was like super cool, or did you like not care about it at all?
I really had no, like, I didn't feel necessarily empowered by the story, but neither was I offended by the story. So to me, it was just overall, eh.
Okay. You were just like, is this over yet?
Yeah, I was like, yay, power, female power can neutralize male, I guess. Okay, woohoo.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think he was really trying to explore those themes, and it just didn't quite click 100%. But like I said, there are things in it that I do like a lot. Did you have anything that came up that you were like, oh, I really like this and I hope they explore more?
I actually really liked, well, when they had that sort of mind game between Mercury and that one professor that,
Mm-hmm.
what did she call him?
The
The,
scientist guy?
yeah, there was like a
Oh,
nickname
I don't remember
for him.
what
I can't
I
remember.
don't remember what you called him.
When she first, I think when she was first mind battling him or whatever. I forget, laughing man or crying man, something like that. Um, I did like sort of that what do you call it, battle between them, battle of wits, I guess you could say, because he saw her as sort of like an old soul,
Mm-hmm. Oh
even though
man,
she's
he's
a
just super
child. And while it
creepy.
did kind of borderline creepy for sure, I did like that dynamic of, a younger character. I mean, it's kind of like the Firestarter idea, you know what I mean? Like, you have a young character who's just so full of power that she doesn't quite understand, and even the guy who thinks understands her, he doesn't understand it either, and it's just beyond anyone's control. But so maybe that's why I like that part so much, because Firestarter is one of my favorite books, and
Yeah.
but
I've never read
that
that one
section,
actually.
oh really, I think it was the first Stephen King book I ever read, and that's what got me hooked on his books, and now I have like over 50 of them. But anyway, I really enjoyed that story. It was that dynamic of a child who has, so much innate power, and everyone wants to control her, but she obviously just blows them all away. And so the character of Mercury I really liked.
Yeah, I like Mercury a lot too as a character. She's really well written, and I guess compared to everybody else, she's definitely the most fleshed out. We spend the most time
Yeah.
with her, other than John, I guess.
Exactly. Marge, I could give or take. Everybody else, I can't even remember anybody else's name, honestly.
Right. Well, you know, they come up every now and then later on in the run,
Oh, okay.
but like at the very end of the Jamie Delano's run, there's like a whole section from like issues 33 to 40. They do come back, but for the most part, everybody just pretty much disappears for like 12 issues or so.
Uh, but yeah, Mercury, I think, was my favorite part of the whole Fear Machine arc. So if she comes back, I will be very happy.
Yeah. Well, I know she does, so be on the lookout
sweet.
for that for sure. So besides the Fear Machine story arc, did you have any issues as you were reading through the first 22 issues that you liked a lot or that were like your favorite?
Okay, so it's hard to say favorite as in, really liked so much as favorite as like just really dark and disturbing. Okay, so I'm gonna
Yeah, that's what
preface
I
that
meant.
with yes,
Like it's your favorite not because you're happy about it, but because it
right,
affected you so much, you know?
yes, exactly. So as far as favorites go, I do have to say mine was probably the issue with John's niece,
Okay, yeah, yeah, for sure.
just because it was so disturbing.
It's so creepy.
It's so creepy, and it doesn't even like start out that creepy because at first you're like, oh, she's just, lonely girl. She wants some friends. She hates the fact that she moved to a new place. Her parents don't understand her, and they're getting into all this weird stuff. Which it's also it's the first introduction of the what was the group name again?
Oh man, you put me on the spot. I totally forgot.
The prayer
Um,
warrior
the
people.
they're the crazy Christians. Yeah, that's what we'll
Yes,
call them.
them.
Oh, the Resurrection
So yeah,
Crusade. That's what it is.
yes, that was the first issue where they come up, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think they were mentioned in the
I think
background, like in the earlier issues. So yeah, I think you're right.
that was where they kind of like made their appearance and then continuously after that. But just that idea of, lonely girl, want some friends, meet some friends, and you're like, oh, that's nice. And then things just start getting creepy with the whole we can go to this house and the man is there and he lets us do whatever he wants as long as he's okay with it. And then they start talking about marriage and rings, and you're just like, where is this going? But just that creeping sense of dread that I love
Mm-hmm.
because I love horror. So the creeping, disturbing sense of there is something really wrong here, and how that just grows and grows and grows through the whole issue is so disturbing, and I love the way it's written, and piece by piece, panel by panel, how it just keeps growing and building, even up to when the guy shows up and you're like, oh, what is gonna happen? What is he gonna do? And
Yeah, like exactly how far is this gonna go?
exactly. Didn't know where exactly the threshold was of how far he can push it with this issue. And he pushed it pretty darn close to like absolutely obscene. But thankfully, John did step in with Zed, because Zed was also introduced in this one too.
Actually, I think she's introduced in the second issue.
Was it the second one? Oh, that's right, because that's when he.
Well, actually, no,
Yeah.
it is. It's in the third issue that she is introduced, because this was number 4, and in this one, she already knows John because they've already slept together, and she goes to John's sister's house with him, just kind of tagging along.
That's right. I get them confused. It's kind of blurring together a little bit.
I've read them a bunch, so that's the only reason I know.
But yes, just going all the way, to the climax where those guys, the Crusade people show up, burn the house down, like, because that's their justice. And John's just like, all right, I did what I set out to do. Let them do what their thing. But that was a great ending to that story, and still so creepy.
Oh, yes, super creepy. So after listening to all this stuff, all these 22 issues, do you have more an appreciation of the character of John Constantine? Like when you read Sandman and stuff, do his appearances make more of an impact now?
Yes, actually, and both because of Swamp Thing and Hellblazer, realizing how intertwined the stories are, which I had no idea that there was such a connection between them, being able to fill in some blanks of like, oh, so this is what's happening, like the um, darkness, or
Right.
that
Yeah, the Void.
the void. Yes,
And they actually brought that
was
back this last year in DC. I don't know if you
oh, no
read
way.
it, but they totally brought back the darkness in the big Crisis event from last summer. It was called Dark Crisis, and it was when the darkness came back.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And so I was like, this is like a total callback to Swamp Thing, and he's not even in it.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah,
I mean, that you can't do a callback like that without Swamp Thing. Come
I
on.
know. That's what I was thinking. And they don't even have John Constantine in it either. I mean, he was there fighting, doing some magics and stuff.
Yeah,
That's when Zatanna's dad died. It
that's messed up.
was a pretty big thing in DC, and they just totally
Well,
ignored it.
did it start and did it finish?
Yeah, yeah, it's done now.
Oh, so they never even showed up at all the whole time?
Nope, not at all. Well,
sucks.
right now they don't even have like a series for either John or Swamp Thing.
True.
So there's not really like a place for them to be, I guess. I don't know that. I guess that's why they didn't include them. But that's like modern DC, so we don't need to go into that. But so were there any other issues besides the child bride one that caught your interest or that you liked a lot?
To me, the epitome of Constantine, the moment that I was just like, yes, this, like, I get this character, was when Swamp Thing shows up in his apartment randomly out of his smokes. So his whole body is made of tobacco. And he's just like, I'm gonna, like, I know what to do. I'm gonna figure this out with, the whole issue they're dealing with. And Constantine's like, okay, just a minute. And he takes a little piece of Swamp Thing off,
Just a little pinch.
and rolls it up and smokes it. I was like, oh my God, nobody would do that to Swamp Thing but Constantine.
Yeah.
Like, that is the epitome of his like, I don't give a fuck character.
Yeah, like it's funny because when I read this, I had never read Swamp Thing, so I read Hellblazer first, and when I first read it, I thought it was funny, but then once I read all the Swamp Thing stuff that intertwines with this, and with the full context of that, it's way funnier because Swamp Thing literally hates John. Like,
Yeah.
with a passion.
He was dicking him around for so many issues of just like, let's do this and let's do that. And oh, hey, what if you do this? I can help you figure this out. And just pushing him along, dragging him along to all these things to just frustrate him. So yeah, for it to culminate in the apartment where he's just like, by the way, I'm just gonna like borrow this little piece of you. And so what was it you were talking about? Like,
Yeah.
smoking.
Yeah, like smoking Swamp Thing's tobacco body. It's just fantastic.
And then the what do you call the comeback of the tattoo was also pretty fun.
Yeah, and that keeps coming back. Like if you read Swamp Thing further, every time they draw him, they always draw that tattoo, and it's always like that tree on his ass. They don't really show it too much in the Constantine series, but every now and then he'll be like nude, and they will show his butt.
Yes.
Anytime he gets his pants off in the series, they show that tree tattoo. And
which is great.
It's pretty fantastic. I love it. I love that.
Because that's how we first met Mercury, where she's just like, "Why? Like that's a tree on your ass," or like, "I like what was it? I like your tattoo," and it's like, "What tattoo?"
Yeah, he's like, "What are you talking about? I don't have a tattoo." Yeah, I appreciate that stuff a lot. So I always get this question from people, like that message me and stuff. They want to know where to start reading Hellblazer, and I always tell them that Original Sins, the first trade, is the place to start because it's a great introduction to the character. You get everything that is John in like one trade. Do you feel the same way about that?
Absolutely. I thought that just starting, I thought it was great. It gave you a great introduction just of like who he is. If you had never read Swamp Thing or Sandman or even seen the movie and you were just like, who is John Constantine? If you start with just that first trade, those first issues, it gives you everything you ever need to know about the character.
Yeah, like you get his attitude and like the way he is.
His wit, his jokes, his trauma.
Yeah, they definitely set up all the mysteries about his life, and that definitely gets you to want to read more. So that being said, is there anything else you wanted to touch on the character or the storylines?
Well, I want to say that like having never known who he was before listening to the podcast, because all I knew was he's just some guy. I just assumed he was just some random guy, no different than any other character who would pop up in Sandman, because they always have characters who just pop up once and then are never mentioned again, or like they die or something. So I assumed he was just one of those who just happened to not die at the end of the issue that he was in. And then seeing the movie and then finally realizing who he was through both the Swamp Thing and the Hellblazer podcast. I'm just so happy that now I know who he is and can appreciate him as a character. And yeah, it's been really great. I'm so glad you did this podcast because otherwise I I'd probably never have picked up Hellblazer at all. So after like getting this far, at least with Fear Machine, I actually went to my library and happened to find a trade of Original Sins. So I was able to read it in print and be like, ah, this is so cool. This is exactly how you were describing it. And actually, sometimes it was a little bit easier because the dialogue is a little crazy
Uh-huh.
sometimes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Especially his inner monologue is like, where are you going with this sometimes?
Yeah, yeah.
What are you talking about? I
Sometimes
don't
it's definitely
understand.
hard to pick and choose what I'm going to say during the episode when I'm reading it.
So it's much appreciated to have your streamlined version, but also it's a great backdrop for if you're like, oh, well, I actually kind of want to dig a little deeper, see the art, get the story from cover to cover. That was really cool too. So being able to reference both the podcast when I was reading the actual trades was really nice. So thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
that.
Thank you. That's super nice of you. And you bring up a good point because one thing I always wish I could do more of is show the art, but that's why I show the pages on YouTube and stuff. Like when I make the background for the audio on the YouTube videos. But like, what did you think of the art? Because now that you've read it, I mean, personally to me, this is some of the craziest art, like the most violent and the most like graphic stuff, especially for the time period. Because the only thing even close to this for the time period is Swamp Thing. So what do you think of it?
I appreciated that they drew it a different way with different like poses. Sometimes it wasn't always about being like a hero pose. Sometimes it would just be like focusing on, uh, like a side shot of him because there was something in the background that you needed to notice, or a lot more creative, like the beach one,
Oh yeah, the beach one is insane.
which was bonkers.
Yeah, that one is like I didn't even know how I was gonna do that one because it's so crazy.
And even from the panels that you showed on the sides, I'm still trying to figure out what does it mean? What does it actually mean? What is he trying to say with the
Oh
art?
yeah, like what is he trying to do with all the dream
Yeah,
stuff? And also like I have to toe the line because I don't want to spoil the end of the issue while I'm
right.
explaining it. So I have to like pretend and hide the fact that it was a dream, and I just have to
Hmm.
describe like a skeleton seagull and a crazy
And
woman.
then the skeleton birds eat the baby, and then there's a whirlwind.
Yeah, and then at the end, I'm like, it was all a dream.
And then he woke up.
Yeah, and like with this kind of issue, that's it's hard because I have to describe all this stuff, and I don't want to spoil the surprise of that
Hmm.
dream ending, and I have to describe this stuff that's crazy without being like it's a dream.
You have to take it very seriously, which you did, by the way. It was like very serious.
Well, I try to, I try to take it seriously, although sometimes it is pretty funny to laugh at some of this stuff.
It really is, and it makes it easier for me to laugh too. Sometimes only too I'm like, should I laugh this? Oh, okay, yes, it's actually funny.
Yeah, like it gives you a little freedom for that.
It's ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah, well, I think, and I mean, like, if you're down for it, and if everyone else that's listening likes this, I would love to do this like every time there's a story arc. Just cover it, touch base, and see what you think about it as someone who's listening to the podcast. I just think that adds like a fun dynamic, and of course, everybody else who's listening to this. If you like these, let us know so that we, can continue doing them. But, I'm really appreciative of your time, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this and talk about Hellblazer and everybody's favorite laughing magician.
It was fun. Thank you so much. I love to talk about comic books. I really enjoyed both the podcast and getting to see the comparison. Lucky enough to find the trade available so that I could really appreciate the art and everything. And yeah, I'd love to do this again sometime. This was fun.
All right. Well, yeah, like we'll do that. And, let us know, like I said, if you guys like it. And we'll be sure to do that. I think we'll probably do it anyway. But yeah. And also, like the other podcasts we talk about, the Swamp Thing and the Planes, Trains, and Comic Books podcast, you can find both of those under Planes, Trains, and Comic Books on any podcast app or Spotify, stuff like that. And also, I'm sure you know, but in case you don't, I do have a Patreon where if you're enjoying these free episodes, well, I got news for you. I got about 40 issues ahead in the Patreon. So if you like these issues and you need more John Constantine, then definitely go check us out at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books and sign up for that Hellblazer tier. And with that, we will see you on the next one.
On the next one.
Bye.
Bye.